Hey guys, welcome back to Creators Campfire. It has been a minute, but I've come back. We are going to do a slightly different format this time. I officially have a co-host, Liz. Say hello.
Hi.
So I have been on hiatus because I basically got all in my head about like perfectionism, the usual stuff, and I was like, oh my god, I need to film like amazing episodes, and I actually did film like 10 episodes, and I haven't put them out. Which is obviously my fault, and they will come out because they will be interspersed with this season now. But me and Liz were talking, and clearly, very obviously, I needed accountability, as I'm sure you can relate if you're listening to this as a creator. So what we decided is that, yeah, Liz would be my accountability. We would jump on a call every Sunday. It's now Sunday morning, the 6th of August. And we would talk about stuff. And that way, I'd have a podcast coming out. And the stuff I'm going to talk about and that Liz is going to talk to me about is behind the scenes of a creator. So one thing I've realized is that on the podcast, I interview creators, but I actually work for a creator, and I don't think I've ever done my story. And I also realized I could give you a behind the scenes look into what it looks like working with a creator. Now, Liz is also somebody who works with creators and has dabbled with being a creator herself as well. So what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to dig in a little bit into Liz's background, and then we're going to go into mine, and then we're going to tell you what you can expect from this podcast going forward. So, hey Liz.
Hey. That was like a really good kind of potted history of everything we want to do.
Amazing. You stick a mic in front of me and suddenly some stuff comes back. I've just literally spent 10, 15 minutes setting up because we jumped on a call. And I was like, yeah, I still haven't got my camera out, I haven't got my mic connected, haven't got anything ready. But I feel like I'm ready to record. Anyway, we are officially started. So, Liz, people are not going to know who you are. Not that they really know who I am. But, so let's kick off. Give me a little 60-second summary about your background, and then we can dig into it a bit more.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess where to start. So, I've been working in the corporate world for like the last 25 years or so since graduating uni. I left uni, I did an English degree, didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd never met a poor accountant. I was like, I'll join accountancy while I figure this stuff out. And that's 25 years. Yeah, kind of day job is I'm working still in an accounting firm as a partner, but also, as you say, I've kind of dabbled with multiple side hustles, including starting my own channel a couple of years ago, which I really want to focus on women in the workplace. And obviously that's some of the chats you and I've had over the years in terms of advocating for yourself and kind of empowerment and stuff. Alongside that, I happen to be married to the same guy for 25 years who has now become a creator accidentally during lockdown, and now has got like 1 million subs across his platform. So I'm also seeing it from the side of helping him manage the business side of that, and also all the pressures on a creator, because it sounds really easy, doesn't it? Like, just pick up a camera and start creating, and it really isn't that simple. So I think I've kind of got 3 little kind of fingers in the pot, if you like. So obviously day job, which I'm like, I lead a team of 50, I have to be on it, time management, all of that kind of stuff. Then I've tried it myself, and I know actually that's quite tough to do, especially when, in my case, like you don't really get any success, and then like how do you carry on doing it? And then thirdly, like with my husband, and just understanding it from his side, and all the kind of unforeseen things that come with being a creator and managing the business side of it, which when you first pick up a camera isn't probably something you're thinking of.
Yes. Okay. This is great because there's so much to dig into. But you're right. Like we have had many conversations on like the female side of things and in the workplace. And if I can, just for a second, tell anyone who is listening how amazing Liz is. Like you have a conversation with her and you're like, it all makes sense. And you just felt heard and listened to. So that was one of the other reasons actually I wanted Liz on. Because she has all of that history and she has all of that knowledge and experience, and is just fantastic. So we will dig into a lot of that kind of stuff. And I want to start with, actually, I was going to do it chronologically, but actually, let's start with you venturing into the creator world. Like, what was the trigger for you?
Yeah, I think, so I'm going to come across as like a super fan of Ali's now, which is like isn't probably very healthy. But so I'd been watching him, and I think I started watching Ali when he was around 300k subs, so still quite early on. Like obviously a really decent number, but still quite early on. But he happened to work in a hospital not too far from me, and actually through my day job I had kind of connection. So it was kind of one of those. I felt like there was kind of I knew him, but anyway, and I just liked his stuff because it was talking about a lot of the things that I think don't get talked about in the workplace. So how to manage your time, how to be productive, how to do all of those things, which really are the secret or superpower to any job, aren't they? Like most of the people I know who are successful, it's because they've got that stuff down pat. yeah, of course they're technical experts in their fields and stuff, but that's not the thing that differentiates them. And I think I've always been a little bit interested in success, what makes people successful, like what makes certain people successful and not others. And I think then then Ali launched PTYA, and it was obviously in lockdown, and I'd gone from working 60 or 70 hours a week with a commute to then being at home all the time, and I suddenly had kind of a bit of free time and a bit like, and we couldn't do anything, right? We couldn't go anywhere. So that's when I did PTYA, and that's when I kind of launched like my channel, which was around, as I say, kind of helping women empower themselves in the workplace. Because, and I think this is kind of one of the things we'll touch on loads, is like most of the conversations I have with people, like they just don't back themselves. And I see it more in women, but it's true for all creators. There's just so many fears and so many obstacles, mainly in our own minds, that hold us back from doing these things. And it's like, if we can just unpick some of that stuff, then I think people, you know, none of us can guarantee success, but at least you'll feel like you're progressing. And I feel like a lot of people I talk to feel stuck in a kind of stasis of, like you said, overthinking, perfectionism, what happens if I fail, what happens if I become super successful and then I get trolled, or like what happens if I become super successful and people follow me down the street, like all of these multiple constructs that we kind of have in our heads that just mean people don't kind of take the first step. So I think kind of combination, like chats I've had with like you and other creators, but then also like the conversations I have with my husband about his like struggles sometimes to create and getting over that kind of those stumbling blocks. So I think, yeah, taking the first step's always the most difficult, isn't it? But for me, like PTYA was like a great foray into, I felt like I was hacking it. Like, okay, I don't need to do trial and error. Like I know the things I need to do. So yeah, that's kind of how I guess it all kind of started, that I became a creator, but that kind of side's died. The business side of me's kicked in, and that's kind of what I spend most of the time doing now.
Nice. Side note, because I have been told many a time in the past that sometimes I say things or acronyms and people might not have any idea what I'm talking about. So firstly, like when we talk about Ali, and we'll go into this in a bit more detail, we're talking about Ali Abdal, the productivity YouTuber. And secondly, when we'll, and I'm sure we'll do this many a time, refer to PTYA, it's Ali's part-time YouTuber Academy course, which I'm sure we'll link somewhere if you want to go and check it out. Shameless plug for the team. Cool. Okay, I will try and remember to do that. But yeah, if you notice us,
and please shout me out, because I'm terrible for acronyms as well. So yeah,
yeah, we'll just dig in, like jump into them. But okay, cool. So I'm debating whether to go into your like current creatory stuff or your background stuff before. Maybe it makes sense to go into your background stuff, because I think that maybe lays a bit of the foundation. So yeah, so you still have a day job, so maybe like let's talk about that first.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I always kind of forget to talk about the day job sometimes. But so I'm a partner, which for those of you who kind of watch any kind of legal or accounting kind of program on TV know that that's kind of the epitome, like that's the top of a pyramid in professional services. So like most people, I've spent quite a long time, 20 years working to get to be a partner. And the difference between a partner and say other roles in the firm is you actually own part of the firm. So you buy your way in, you own part of that firm. So you're not an employee anymore, like you own part of that firm. So that's kind of what I do. I help organisations manage risk profiles, but they tend to be really big organisations, so up to $1 billion, say, turnover. So what I love about like my husband's side of the business is obviously it's very micro comparison to that, but it's interesting how many of the same kind of issues come up. So I think when I always talk to people who are creators, I think they don't always think about the business side or the problems that come with the business side. So I think that's where my risk head kind of kicks in and goes like, what could go wrong here? Like, what can we do to kind of mitigate it? So like I say, I left uni having done an English degree, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So my parents are both accountants, grandparents are accountants, kind of in the family business. But weirdly, I'm really bad at maths. Like that's my worst subject. So like I dropped it as soon as I could. It was my worst GCSE. So unlike probably, and we'll talk about your journey into accountancy, but like for me, it was a bit of a random move, but driven by the fact that I wanted to make money. And it turned out to be a great move. And I ended up in a branch of of the profession, which actually is not about numbers and it's all kind of about risks and talking to people, which plays a lot more into my skill set. But it took a few years to kind of find that. So like that's what I did kind of out of uni. And then over the years, like I knew that like the people side of businesses is what interests me. And I really like understanding how culture and people affect, like back to the success point, like basically why some cultures work and why some cultures don't work. So I did a few years ago a master's in leadership and management, but more focusing on the impact of female leadership in organisations and obviously vested interest, but the more female leaders you have, right, the better. Yes. So that's kind of been my shtick, and then that's kind of led to what are the reasons why women don't rise within organisations. So I did a dissertation on the impact of female leaders on accounting firms. Again, vested interest. But it turns out there weren't enough female leaders. There weren't any female CEOs at that time of the top accounting firms in the UK. There were more CEOs named John than there were like just all the usual stuff that you kind of hear. So then that kind of led me down the line of doing research around what stops women rising within organisations, not unique to accounting firms, just generally. And that's when things like imposter syndrome, I started to understand more about that, and also the cultural and other constructs that we have that kind of potentially like hold women back. The story I always kind of tell around this is when I was 11, I lived in a very typical English village, and there was a cricket team, and my brother, who was a year younger than me, was on the cricket team, and I wanted to join the cricket team. Not because I wanted to play cricket, because if you've ever seen me do anything sporty, it's shocking, but because women weren't allowed. And at that time, obviously like 30 years ago, like that was quite common. And I think what's interesting, so I fought and I lobbied and I got girls onto the team, and obviously that was great. I then stopped playing about 3 weeks later, much to my mother's like chagrin. But
you did your job.
Yeah, I did my job. I literally pursued what I needed to. But I think it's interesting 30 years on in business, I'm still having those conversations about like what rooms women don't feel like that they can enter or feel like they need permission to be in. So I think that's kind of been the golden thread for me. Like most of our careers, they've ebbed and flowed. I think the thing I also say is like social media and content creation wasn't an option when I left school. Like that wasn't around, and you know, we were still given very traditional career paths. And I think what's amazing these days is you don't have to follow a traditional career path, but also when I talk to creators, that's also quite scary, because the safety of a job like mine is you do this, you move to the next level. These are the competencies. This is what you need to hit. There's your next level. And it's like, it's for someone like me, who's a type A, it's very clearly, type A personality that is, very clearly laid out what I need to do, how I need to be successful. And I think the thing with the creator world is sometimes you don't know why a video is successful, something goes viral. Like that's absolutely what happened to my husband. It was a very accidental career. So my husband started his channel during lockdown because he'd worked in outdoor events. Obviously, during lockdown, that was like the last thing that they were going to do was throw Glastonbury. So he all of a sudden was at home with nothing to do, furloughed, and he just started making videos in our back garden. And then it like quickly caught fire. And then within a few months, he had like several 100,000 followers. And it wasn't something he predicted. He was like 53, 54 at the time. Again, yeah, atypical kind of content creator. But with it brought this whole other kind of business side that he was just like, that's not his thing. I've always joked that Baz doesn't really need a wife. He just needs a really good PA. And I think probably we'll talk about that as well. But that's kind of what happened is like all of a sudden you get some success in the creator world, and then you're like, oh God, how do I manage this? How do I make sure I don't fall foul of anything? So that's kind of where I stepped in that respect. So I think it's sometimes easier to do it for other people than it is for yourself. But perhaps, again, that's a very female kind of way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's also a topic that I think we've written down for another day. Because, so we both, I guess, we're having this conversation before, like working for and working with creators. So, you very clearly work with your creator. Yeah. I officially work for, but Ali also does like to say, we're all working with each other. But yeah, actually, that's also reminded me we should definitely get Baz on to do one of these because that would be very fun. And actually, we should do one with the both. Like, we should have one with the both of you, like very specifically. It would be interesting to see the dynamics. Okay, cool. That is, There's actually, we don't need to go into Baz's stuff. We'll get Baz on and we'll talk about his stuff. So, what specifically, I guess, are you like managing with Baz now? Because you're right. I think there's this thing like as a creator, you probably become a creator because you're creative, and naturally you then don't end up knowing the business side because you are more like a creator. Like the creativity thing is more of a thing than the business thing, and it reminded me of like the E-Myth Revisited book that I'll link if anyone wants to check it out. But it's the whole like working in the business versus working on the business. So you're 100% right. That is the kind of things that creators get to, because they're like, I just make content and put it out there, and then all of a sudden like partnerships or sponsorships or brand deals come out of the woodwork, and they all of a sudden have to manage email, and maybe they need to hire people, an editor, and then all of a sudden they need somebody else to manage the business side of things. So what does that look like for you? Yeah,
so for us it looks like much more. So anything grown up basically will be like what I do. So as you said, like brand deals, sponsorships, partnerships, anything where like there's a legal kind of view or a legal contract that we're kind of entering into, I obviously handle that side. I also think it's often as a creator easier for someone else to do the negotiation on your side. So particularly early days when you're like working out how much you're worth and like what you should be asking for brand deals and stuff, if you're talking just direct to the person, it's quite awkward. Whereas I think if you're using a third party like like me in our case, or an agency, or whoever it happened to be, it's a lot easier to have those conversations. So I think that's one of the things I do, is obviously take care of the money. Then there's also all the like the logistics of everything. So whether or not it's travel, whether or not it's locations, whether or not it's taxes, whether or not it's what's deductible, what we're putting through the business, all of those kind of things are the things that I kind of handle for him. So he loves replying on social media and stuff. So actually all the comments he handles all the comments.
Nice.
But like I know a lot of people, that be something that they kind of outsource and stuff. So yeah, if you mess it, I'm probably opening kind of worms there. If you mess Baz, he will definitely answer you. But so I don't kind of get involved in that side, and I don't get involved in necessarily like what the video should be, or like the creative side is all him, and he's incredible at that. Like he always has been. And I think again, social media, had it been around when he was younger, I think it definitely would have been something he gravitated towards. Like he's really good at visuals, he's really good at photography and stuff. So I think it was a natural evolution for him, but lockdown just gave us that stop where we're like, okay, we can spend 8 hours filming because we've got nothing else to do.
Nice. Yeah. And actually that's a really good point. I think the whole, like, you do so much stuff. Like I look at, like, you have it, like, and not just a normal day, like you have a demanding day job. Like it's not something that like is an easy thing to do. And then you do this on top of it, and it's just like, yeah, okay, like it is possible. And that comes into the whole like time management and energy management and all the processes and stuff you put behind the stuff, I think. So we can definitely dig into that in future episodes as well, I think, because that's something I do not do very well, and conversations that we definitely have of like, how do I do things better, please? So we will dig into that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, and like, but I'm the other way. Like, I'm not very good at resting. So like, for me, and I think we'll probably talk about this, but like, a lot of this is about what drains you. So like for Baz, the creative stuff energizes him. Like he loves doing that. But like, ask him to fill in a tax return, and that's going to absolutely drain his energy. Whereas I'm the other way around, and I think that's probably like all good partnerships have that yin and yang, don't they? And we'll talk a little bit about you in your role, but I think finding fit in organisations or finding fit as creators is really important, and knowing where your blind spots are and knowing what you're not very good at, therefore where you need help. So for me, when I was doing my YouTube channel, I outsourced my filming, editing. Like I just literally used to sit down in front of a camera and record because that's what I wanted to do, and I had the luxury of being able to pay someone to be able to do that for me. But I think it is, as a creator, kind of knowing where you need that support, and that's sometimes difficult to work out when you're in the beginning.
Yeah, actually, I think that's one of the big things that like stands out to me, and one of the reasons I think like I do this podcast is I, for the longest time thought I wanted to be a creator, and I'm not saying that I don't necessarily want to be a creator, but create that side of things doesn't give me the same energy that it does the Bazes or the Ullys of the world. And what I realized is it wasn't corporate or creator. It was actually, there's this like middle area where you can work for/with creators, and still, like, you can still be that organized person or do the operations and the logistics and all of that stuff, because creators need that person in their lives to do that stuff, and you don't have to be in front of the camera all the time. And that to me was like such an unlock, because doing the corporate thing, I was like, this isn't life. This can't be like life. But I knew that when I tried to be a YouTuber, there was so much stuff that I was like, I just don't. Do I really want to do this? And then like that sweet spot was actually, I want to be in that creative world. I want to be in the YouTube world. And I was so lucky to be able to go, I'm now working for a YouTuber. And I kind of like, my biggest thing is just letting people know that it's not one or the other. Like that, there is a sweet spot in the middle there.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's really interesting, isn't it? And our sweet spots look different. So mine's still working corporate, but then doing this around the edges, and then yours is like you've made a like career transition. So that's probably be a good time to have a chat about, like, I guess your background and how you ended up here.
Interesting. Yes, let's do this. Okay, so I think that's why we get on. I think like background wise and the values that we had and like the kind of upbringing, we have very similar kind of things that we've stuck on. We've talked about this before. So I had a typical Indian like upbringing of, I don't want to sound a bit too mean, but the women are second class. It's all about the guys. It's all like patriarchy, all of that stuff. And similar. So I genuinely did and do love football. And growing up, like I was always told, like, don't go and play with the boys, or there just wasn't that option at school. I remember like what's the one, whatever the one before primary school is. Oh, I get confused. Like year 1 or 2, whatever that was. And all the boys would play football. And I was like, well, I want to play football. And they were lucky. I was lucky enough that they let me play, but I was the only girl. And it's just like, this is just so weird. So I kind of grew up in that environment, and I was saying it was all gloom and doom, but like, it was very clear that there is a divide here. And yeah, like males are treated differently to females. And I got that growing up. I have 2 brothers, one older, one younger, and just the freedom that they had, whether they chose to use it or not, was very different to the freedom that I had. And at the same time, my life was laid out in front of me in theory of like, you go to school, you go get a degree, and genuinely you then go and get married and have kids, and that's your life. And they want you to be a doctor or whatever, because Indians, but they also exactly. So you do it so you get the better husband, and then it's like, well, get in the kitchen because now you have to go and work.
To eat, right?
Yeah. So go and do your 9 to 5, but it doesn't go outside the 9 to 5. So that doesn't matter what you're doing. You still need to feed your family. Your family comes first, and it's still the wife's duty to kind of do that. So that's a little bit of cultural background, just so you know where we're coming from. So yeah, I did the typical thing. I'm sorry to my grandmother. I couldn't be a doctor. I think I've said this many a time. Failed miserably at it. I think I landed in one of the 5 acceptable career choices for an Indian. I was an accountant. I guess I still technically am an accountant. Nobody should get me to do their accounts though. So yeah, that was kind of my background. So after uni, to do my accounting and finance degree, I qualified with ACCA or whatever, and I worked for 11 years in corporate. I worked for, basically I worked through management accounts, and then I sidestepped into analytics because I was like, I liked numbers. I wasn't necessarily always good at it. I loved the idea of maths because it seemed logical. Was never good at the English stuff. And then, yeah, I realized I didn't like accounting, so I sidestepped into data analytics because I was like, still numbers, but I don't need to deal with the accounting side. And then, yeah, I got to the end of it, and I was like, I guess it was like the side hustle explosion during COVID. And I was like, oh, look, there's other stuff I could do. And I obviously knew that the corporate life wasn't fulfilling, which is why I started looking for side hustles, whatever they were. Kind of came across Gary Vee doing his daily tea with Gary Vee or something, and thought, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. And that was the start of Creators Campfire a few years ago. And it was through that I kind of ended up getting a job for Ali, which is nuts to see how that's kind of happened. That was not a 60-second overview. I apologize. I rambled.
No such thing as rambling. It's all like gets us to the destination. So for those people who don't know what you do for Ali, like what does your day job look like at the moment?
So for the first 2 years of working for Ali, I kind of headed up the operations for the Part-Time YouTuber Academy, which is his YouTube course where we had 8 live cohorts basically over 3 years where, yeah, it was like a 4 to 6 week live course of teaching other people how to do YouTube, but also from the business side of things. It wasn't just from a like the creative point of view. It's exactly what you're talking about. How do you run a business? How do you make money from it? So I headed up the operations for that. And maybe I can go into the story of how I got the job. That'd be interesting in a second. And then what month are we in? We're in August, like maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I actually earlier this year, I think the team was at dinner, and I kind of said to Ali, I'd love to be like, my dream role would be like a PA. Like, it just seems like so much fun. But in my mind, I just meant like maybe at retirement or something. Like, that's what I would like to get to, working 3 days a week or whatever. Anyway, that seems to have stuck. At the end of March, Ali was like, hey, Bhav, you said you wanted to be like a PA. Why don't we kind of make that happen in person? And I was like, oh, cool. So a little bit of context, Ali did have... Oh, actually, we should probably go into the whole PA versus EA thing at some point too, because
100%, yeah,
that was something. So Ali has had an EA who is Dan on the team, and he joined, I think, like a month or 2 before me, so just over 2 years ago now. But he lives in Wales, so he was never in person. I think Ali got to this point where he's like, I actually would get so much more benefit out of somebody being in person. So that kind of just happened overnight, and we were trialing it from the Monday. That conversation was on a Friday. It did mean I was basically doing 2 jobs for like 3 months, but that's a side issue. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm currently Ali's in-person EA. And for anyone who doesn't know, I guess PA technically stands for personal assistant. EA is executive assistant. And there are quite a few differences there. And then we've had the whole chief of staff talk because we're just like, well, what does this actually mean? So yeah, that's what I currently do for Ollie.
And I think this is what's great about working with creators, though, isn't it? Because if you'd been in corporate and you'd said to your boss, "Oh, I want a completely different job," they'd be like, "Jog on." Whereas in like a creator world, it's like, "Oh, absolutely, we can make this happen." And I think what's interesting when I chat to creators is they're really invested in making their team happy and making their team like fulfill their dreams as well, which I think when you've come from very corporate backgrounds isn't necessarily like your boss's first position. And I know like when I've been a boss actually and I've told people, "Oh, you should go for this job over there," they've almost looked at me horrified, like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And it was the right thing for them, but like it's not how the corporate, that's not how the corporate machine generally plays out. So I think that's another really big difference, isn't it, in terms of once you make the leap from corporate, actually it looks quite wide, doesn't it, in terms of what that could look like?
Yeah, I still remember when I was making that decision of like whether to leave, because it all happened over the space of like 2 days, I think, which was crazy. And looking back, I'm like, how absurd that I was even considering staying. Like, what was I even thinking? Yeah, it's completely different. I mean, I was pretty bad in the sense that I think through the 11 years, I probably had like 9 different jobs. But I think in hindsight, that's my ADHD, not anything else. I was at least loyal to the company for 11 years. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I guess going back to my point of you don't necessarily have to be the face of, you don't have to be the creator. This is something that can come back. I will say though, it probably started, I got the job because of the podcast though. So putting yourself out there is very, very important. So it was through the podcast that I kind of met Ali, and it was through that we started talking, that I started helping out on PTY, that we eventually started working together. But yeah, it's definitely a different world.
And I agree about like putting yourself out there actually, because I think our backgrounds, like, and as women, you're kind of taught not to put yourself out there, and corporate kind of encourages that as well, like stay in your lane and all of those types of things. But I think with the creator world, like absolutely putting yourself out there, it's just amazing what the long-term consequences that you can't even fathom really. I think just putting yourself out there is like the critical thing. If I think about the connections I've made through doing PTYA, and obviously because I went in wanting a channel, that didn't happen, but I've had all of these other great experiences, met other people, done loads of different things because of that one step. So I think much more of the creator world, if you're dabbling in it, then something good will come behind the scenes or in front of the camera, like either or.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, so many good things have happened because of it. And like, even one of them being a realization that YouTube isn't for me. Like, had I not even started, I would have just sat there in the background and gone, "Oh, I really want to do that. I really want to do that." And like, it would have been this thing. But I just tried it, and it just like, just go and start. And if like it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least you've done it. And you're right, the opportunities that come. The amount of people in PTYA that don't necessarily create, but have had their lives changed because of doing it is unreal. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It's kind of unintended consequences, or the butterfly effect, doesn't it? But it is really interesting. And I think for me, like for those people who are perhaps still in corporate and thinking it's an either or, you can absolutely do both. And like even like my channel, it was amazing how many people did watch, even though the numbers were very small, but not people who I knew or knew through work. And it was always a talking point. Like, I think that's one of the great things is people like people who do something a little bit different. And when it gives you a kind of uniqueness that they can then latch onto, that's actually really powerful. So I know we kind of joke about it, but you actually only need to make an impact on a very small amount of people. It may not be the millions of followers that everyone thinks that they want or need, but actually more meaningful can be the one person who messages you and like, that really helped me. Like, that's the kind of the benefit of, I think probably actually when you get too big, you don't get that connection, do you? Because you're so far removed from it.
Yeah, no, that's like such a good point, because like, even when we were having this conversation of like resurrecting the podcast or like doing a podcast, we're like, what do we actually want from this? And we're like, something, if like in 12 months, if we've just helped a handful of people, that's a win. Like we're not aiming for like millions and millions of subscribers. If guys, we want to get there, then that's cool.
If you want to take us there, we'll absolutely go. But
we'll go. But like that is not the point. And I think, kind of going back to like the resurrection of the podcast is like that whole perfectionism kind of set in. I was like, what do I want from this? And all of a sudden it was growth conversation. It was like, oh, I need to be creating clips for every single like platform, and I need this to be like amazing. And then like we kind of took a step back and we're like, no, we don't. Not at all. It doesn't need to be that, and there doesn't need to be added friction. And like you can just record and upload something and be okay with it. And at the end of 12 months, you also have documentation of your life for 12 months, and you kind of see where it goes. Maybe we go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I think that's another, and I know like everyone says this about social media, but like when you are dealing with people having big followings, you think it's all super easy. But also, when I talk to creators, like, they're not finished products in any way, shape or form. They have all of the same fears as someone who has 100 followers in terms of, like, their stuff's not good enough, or, like, the perfectionism kind of kicks in and stuff. So it's kind of interesting. The thing I was just thinking when you were talking, though, is, like, both of us, so I think there's probably two sets of creators at the moment, isn't there? There's like, if you're 21 and fresh out of uni, you don't know what to do, absolutely content creation, I would like say follow it and see where it goes, because you kind of got nothing to lose at that age. And you can always go into corporate at 25 or 30 or so, like, there's no point. But I think both you and I got to that position when probably mid-30s where you're like, okay, I've done this, but like I need something more. And that's almost more scary to kind of give up a salaried job, isn't it? In terms of like the money you're earning and all of the cachet and status that comes with being an accountant or like working in professional services or whatever. And so I think there's probably a lot of people listening who maybe know there's something else in the tank, but don't quite know how to kind of manifest it. And I think what you're saying is you don't have to become a creator. You could perhaps start helping a creator and then see where that goes, rather than being like, oh, I need to get a channel, I need to get 1 million subs and then I can give up my day job, because I just don't think that you don't need to do that.
Yeah, because because before I got this, I was literally just emailing creators and saying, and doing the whole, guys, I'll work with you for like a month, like completely free. Let's figure something out. Here are some ideas of things where I can help. Because obviously if you're like cold approaching, there's a way to do that. Maybe that's an episode for another day, but like, you don't have to like go from working full time to quitting your job and then trying the creator thing. Like, try it on the side, whether that's working for another creator to gain experience or because you prefer doing that, or just like making a YouTube video every week. It's definitely something that you should 100% do. And you're right with the big creators. If you look at Ollie, there's 14 of us on the team. Yeah. I mean, including Ollie. Like, he turns up and he films. I mean, I'm being slightly reductive, but like, ultimately there is a team around him that is ticking all of those boxes. We've got people on socials, we've got people on the podcast, we've got like everything has an owner. But that's come about from actually just making stuff happen in the first place.
And it's not even just the 14 of you. Like, there's also another team of creators, coaches,
yes.
freelancers. Like, it's probably another 30 people.
Yeah.
So Ali's probably got 50 people in this stable helping him be as good as he, which is awesome, right? But like, we can't all compare that to where we need to start, because he didn't start there.
Yeah, exactly. Which is exactly why we started this podcast, I think, is to give you that behind the scenes look at both what our lives are like working for / with creators, but also just like either trying to do it ourselves, because we're technically creators now, we're doing a podcast, but to actually really show you what it's like behind the scenes and the challenges that come up, and what it's like either working with a team of 14 or working as a team of 2, is just kind of what we want to show you, and also the options that are available to you if you don't want to be a creator, or how you gain experience, or how you become that creator, or if you are the creator, how you work with that team. That's a lot of ifs, but basically we're now creators, so we can do this.
Yeah, it's kind of gone a bit meta, hasn't it? Like,
we're
being creators, but not being creators, and now we're creators. Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird ones, isn't it? But I think that's absolutely it. And I think also as a creator, knowing when to bring people on with your team, and I think Alex, obviously we can talk about like the hiring and stuff, but like, as you say, you started in one role and then have transitioned to like another role, and lots of people in Alex's team have done that, haven't they?
Yeah.
So, but the thing you say about reaching out, like, I hear this all the time from creators. They are not necessarily people who like to write job descriptions and put out adverts and like do all that. But if you write to them and be like, this is my skill set, this is how I can help you, here's an example, like, most of them will bite your hand off, because like, again, that's like, they want to create, they don't necessarily want to go through that whole process of finding someone. So if you can put yourself out there, then great.
Yeah. And it's actually surprisingly easy to get a job. You just have to be like reasonably competent. I think that's the bit that gets me, is like, we've had so many like applications or people reaching out, just like, the bar is actually really low, but how people don't hit it is like crazy. Is that you just have to be vaguely confident and competent, right? So just know how to use a Google Sheet, know how to like figure stuff out, and like, I think the biggest one is being reliable.
100%. Yeah.
It's so underestimated, but the amount of people that are actually not reliable is insane. So if you can be reliable and you're half decent at what you do, someone's going to take you on.
Yeah, and I think, like, I'm a big believer, and I know Ali is as well, in terms of, like, you can teach people stuff. Like, as long as they've got the right attitude and the right... And I've hired a lot of people in corporate, like, I hate to think how many people I've hired and fired over the course of my career. But the thing that differentiates people is like that just willingness to, like, as you say, be reliable and do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, but also just being open and flexible to kind of new ideas. Like that absolutely is. And even corporate, it's moving at a pace now. Like we've got technology coming in and you need to adapt. Otherwise it's kind of evolve or die really, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think we've covered me, we've covered you, we've covered a bit about what the podcast is going to be, and we're going to do these are going to be weekly. Yep, we're tying ourselves up to that. That will happen.
That's a commitment.
That is a commitment that we are making. We're doing the same. Like, you know, you need to stay committed and be accountable. We are going on this journey with you. Is there anything else we want to talk about today?
So I guess like we'd love to hear what questions have got for us, like what you'd like to know either about like what we do or how we do it or kind of all those types of things. So yeah, love people to ask us some questions. And then I think, did you want to dive into a little bit, I guess, like what's happened this week and your prescriptions and how that's all kind of manifested itself?
Yes, good point. Actually, on the questions, we should probably set something up that lets people ask questions. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just throw them under the video. If you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice, then we'll figure something out. I think on some of them, I think you can ask questions, but yeah, if it's not available now, we'll get that up and running next week. And I think we've talked about like having a little Q&A section specifically. So if you do have questions, then let us know. So one of the things that I think makes sense to do with this podcast is I guess talk about our weeks and what's kind of come up in that. So what have we been talking about this week? Where are we? Oh, lots of random stuff has come up this week. Okay, so one is me and Ali had a conversation the other day about really defining the role. I think that was one of the things that was missing. So like I said, when I started the role, I was A, doing my old PTYA job and B, trying to figure this out. And Ali's experience had been more of like working with a non-in-person EA. So we were both trying to figure the role out. And also it wouldn't, because it was in person, that just the scope would have been different. So we've kind of been like ambling through over like the last 3-4 months or whatever. And then last week we actually this week, I don't even know what day it is. We sat down and we had this conversation about, okay, cool. We've got a bit of like experience behind us working together. There's a lot coming up in the next year. What do we actually want this to look like? Ali, what do you need? Because ultimately I'm here to make your life easier. And I think we came up with like 4 key areas, I think. And this links back to the whole PA-EA. I'm going to chief of staff in quotes here because it still feels weird to me. So a PA is like the personal assistant, which is probably your stereotypical assistant that is, I might be very wrong, by the way. Liz, tell me if I'm talking crap. Is kind of more your calendar management, email management, that kind of the basics. Yeah,
getting you to the right place at the right time with the right info is kind of what that role is.
Nice. And then I guess the step up from that is the EA, so the executive assistant. And the idea here is it's a bit more of a strategic role, i.e. you go to the same meetings. So you still have, obviously, the email management, the calendar management, although I think there is an option to maybe have your own PA or another EA like doing stuff. But it's a bit more of a strategic role in that you're in the same meetings, you have those conversations, you are a bit more of a bouncing board for, I guess they say your exec, which feels really weird in the creator world. But yeah, for the person you are working for.
I guess Ali's like CEO, right? So
yeah, although I guess, that's the other difference that's happened, I guess, and the change that's happened recently at work is that Ali's basically said, Angus, who was, job titles are really weird, especially in such a small company, but let's roll with it. I have my own opinions on them. But so Angus was previously GM, aka general manager, which basically meant he had oversight to everything. But Ali was still officially the CEO of the business. What's happened recently is Ali's kind of gone, I don't really want to be the CEO. I want to be the talent and the visionary. And yeah, I basically want to rock up and film when I'm needed to, and I want to go away and write. So whether that's another book or whatever, I don't need to be involved in the day to day. So he's gone, Angus, you are officially now CEO. That hasn't, like, Angus's role hasn't actually changed that much, I don't think. I mean, there's a lot more responsibility, I guess, because ultimately he is kind of the CEO. Yeah, basically. But he was doing a lot of this stuff anyways. So yeah, again, sorry, going back to the point is that I don't know how much of the whole exec thing is just it's probably in my head. It just feels a little bit weird. But yeah, Ali is the visionary or whatever. And yeah, basically, I guess my job is to make sure he still has that connection to the business. And I think this is where the chief of staff kind of comes in a little bit, but it's not a traditional chief of staff because it's not to the team as a whole. This is the bit I can't quite get my head around. And now I'm just probably rambling. But I guess what I'm saying is it's more of a strategic role. It's more the planning and the future planning and understanding things and jumping in where is necessary. So yes, there's the calendar management, and like we're all going remote from the start of October. So there's a whole lot of planning involved in that in terms of where we're going and who we're seeing and like accommodation flights, the kind of standardy stuff. But I think there is almost also the strategic conversations that may need to happen, that he wants to happen. And also this idea that, which I think potentially was yours, of like this innovation buddy of like Ali gets this idea as he has a million of them. And it's like, okay, Bhav, you go and work out version 0.1 of this before we derail the whole team to work on something else. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think the last bit, so I used to work in commercial development for Argos, which was like a specialised team where it used all the same skills as an auditor, which is why I kind of did it. But it was like you say, basically like, here are 100 ideas, like what are the 5 that we should really throw some like effort behind. And 95% of what you did would never go anywhere. Like they just say no and like you'd move on to the next pitch and whatever. So I think like, yeah, this role, it's probably hard to job title it, isn't it? Because lots of these job titles come with kind of connotations like chief of staff's really White Housey, isn't it? I always thinking like West Wing. I mean, I love a chief of staff role. I think it's a great role, but it just sounds really like dramatic. And then like EAPA doesn't really kind of fully capture like, as you said, like the innovation side and the development side. So, I mean, interface isn't a very sexy title for it, but it's almost like you're the interface between like Ali's thought processes and the business and vice versa. So it's kind of almost this like communication conduit between like what flows down from Ali and what flows back up from the business to Ali. And I think you guys all need to find your way with like what that looks like. And also, as we know, like over time, it will naturally ebb and flow. Like Ali's got a book coming out, hasn't he? Like that's really going to change like what the focus of the business is for a while and stuff. So I think it's, maybe we need to come up with a completely new. I mean, I kind of just like. I was going to say Man Friday, but I don't like the pronoun on that. But you know, like it's kind of like the right hand woman, right? Like it's just like the fixer almost. Like kind of. I mean, these all sound a little bit dodgy now. I'm saying them out loud, but like there's some kind of like catch-all, which is like. But I guess if he was to introduce you, like what would he introduce you as? Like
this is the thing, and it comes down to assistant, and I. I never thought this would, like, again, the person who said their dream role was to be an assistant. hadn't quite, I think maybe I hadn't realised that I was doing it, like, in this stage of my career. And, like, having worked so hard to achieve, like, all this other stuff, it's not a backward step at all because I know what the day-to-day is. But there's something about when I say I'm an assistant, I'm an EA, that I'm annoyed at myself for being triggered at it. But it is, and I think what I didn't realize until we were just catching up before this is actually maybe that's the female aspect of that, of like, oh, it's just a stereotypical, she's just the assistant. There's no value behind it or whatever, or like the typical like the assistant role, like that's a woman's role.
But like we had this conversation, didn't we, about like, but on your CV, like, you know, the next role, like is like these labels are important, aren't they? Because as you say, like, you may know what you do, but if you're interested in a room full of other creators and they hear assistant, then they might be like, go get the coffee. Like it's, you kind of really want to pitch your position. And I think as women, again, we're really bad at doing this because like we'll do the things, but then not ask for the status. Whereas men are often really good at asking for the status and not necessarily always doing their things. So like, I feel like this is like, it sounds like like you say, it sounds like a really trivial point, but I think it really does encompass like the female experience of work sometimes, which is like, oh, I'll do all the work. Someone will notice it. And it's like, they don't. Like you need to kind of make it known.
So true. You're right. And I will go and get the coffees because it's natural to me to be like that person to make sure everyone's fed. Everyone should be fed and no one should be thirsty and everyone should be comfortable. Exactly. And that's just how I was raised and I'm going to do that. And I need to make sure everyone's happy. But then you do default to just like, oh, is that like shit? Like what you're right. Like there is that whole like what would somebody else say in that position? So yes, I would love a new word for this role.
Yeah.
Like, I think we can create one. If anyone has any suggestions, I'd love to hear them.
100%. I've got like facilitator in my head, but like I don't know if that's right, or commercial director. Like I don't know if that's right, but there's something around that. Like it's almost like a translation role, isn't it? Like, you know how in like tech you have translators. Like I think it's like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ali has an idea, and I need to make it happen. Like that is a translation role.
Yeah, but then it's difficult because like then it's like, well, how much of that have I actually done on the day to day? How much of that will I be doing? And then it's the whole crossover with like the team's needs, which I obviously want to be there for. And again, it's natural for me to do that. And I know you've said this to me many a time of like, actually, but Ali is the priority. Like that is what that's exactly. And it's like, oh, yep, need to remember that. But yeah, just being caught up on that title.
And I think this is one of the things I learned in the work. So I work in quite male-dominated teams, quite male-dominated industries, particularly at partnership level, still quite male-dominated. And I noticed that they don't need to be liked so much. Like, it's really important to me that my team like me. It's really important to me that my clients like me. That's really important to me. Really less so for them. And also they are much quicker at kind of basically going, that doesn't serve me, so I'm just not going to do it. Whereas I think women, again, I've noticed, like, we're much more like, oh, but I have to do everything because that's what they said. It's like, no, like, there's people that have to do that. So it is trying to find your way. Like, a lot of the things you said, like, of course you want to be liked by the team, but that's a really female response. Like, actually, that probably, like, I mean, of course you want to have an effective working relationship with the team. Like being liked is like almost like a separate thing. So yeah, I think that's kind of, it is really interesting to unpick, isn't it? Like how we feel about certain words and certain job titles.
Yeah. Because even saying chief of staff feels weird because I'm not a chief of staff to like a team. And I think that's a typical thing to be the chief of staff to, but maybe it's not. Maybe that interface role is that chief of staff thing.
And I think that's what, for me, like chief of staff means different things in different places. Like sometimes it absolutely is like, but, you know, because you've usually got a HR director or a workforce director or someone like that who's actually in charge of the people. Yes. The chief of staff role is usually that chief exec type in that they're usually in the C-suite. Yeah. But it means different things in different places. So. Yeah.
Yeah, it also doesn't sit right. Okay, we'll find a new word for it. Yeah. That's the
facilitation, interface and translation. Let's just make it really difficult for anyone to say. And then like...
Let's create another acronym.
Yeah, exactly.
That's obviously the answer. Okay. I think that's an insight into future episodes. I will come with problems and Liz will just fix me. No, I'm not broken. I don't need fixing. We'll just we'll work through the issues. If anyone relates, please let me know because at the moment it's just like, oh yeah, you need to get over yourself.
And like I say, it's funny, isn't it? Because you love the job. Like this is your dream job, right? And working for Ali is your dream. It's not like any career. This is like your dream career, right?
Yes, like completely. Like working for Ali for 2 years was already amazing. And then this on top, it's like, what? Like I get to do this. I get to organize someone's life. Already a tick. It happens to be Ali, who just has such interesting like content creator friends and like entrepreneur friends, and he's always going to cool things. Like, how is this not? This is just it ticks every box, and I'm incredibly lucky. And I think the next, I don't know how long, 6 to 12 to 18 months or whatever it is going to be incredibly interesting as we all go remote and we figure out what life is like.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I was going to push back on lucky because it's like I don't really believe in luck because I think as women we often say, "Oh, I'm just really fortunate. I'm really lucky." Yep. It's like no, you got here. Like, Oprah, who obviously is the guru on all things, says like luck is preparation meeting opportunity, which is like if you hadn't sent that email, if you hadn't reached out to him, like none of this would have happened. That's so you're not lucky, and also you're really good at what you do. Like as you say, it's quite a low bar sometimes, but like you're really good. So like, it's fine, right?
I love that. Given and taken away.
Exactly.
You're right. It is a low bar. No, that's a really good point. And I guess just going back to the job role, I guess the one thing that was thrown into the mix this week that we'll probably talk about next week in a bit more detail once it's fleshed out is there's now talk of being a videographer in the day role. So that should be very interesting. I'm now gonna see what that looks like.
Yeah, I feel like the only constant is change in like your world, isn't it? Like...
Yes. If anyone takes one thing away from this episode, it's that.
Yeah.
Things change. I literally could go in tomorrow morning and things could be so different. So yeah.
Which is kind of the antithesis of corporate, right? Because like nothing changes. That's kind of the point of corporate, right? Like it's kind of very, kind of very known all the time. And if there is a change coming, there's like a big consultation period and 6 months of notice and this kind of stuff. Whereas like you guys, it's like, oh no, we've restructured the company. We're doing this tomorrow and we're stopping doing this. We've got this idea and this has come on board. And you're like, it's just reacting, isn't it?
Yeah, so true. Okay, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up this week's episode. I think. Too. Yeah. Well done us for doing this.
Yes, we made it happen.
Yeah. Okay, now I need to make sure that the file gets uploaded because I'm pretty good at everything up to this point. So that's something to think about. But we'll figure that out. All right, guys, we'll be back next week. So in theory, this should be uploaded within 24 hours of us recording. So we'll be back. This is going to be a weekly thing. We're going to talk about all sorts of things that come up in the day-to-day in the creative world. If you have any questions, let us know wherever you're listening to this or watching. If you're watching, hello. I'm going to be my awkward self every week. This is going to be more normal, and we'll set up some kind of we'll set up some sort of Q&A because we really do want to hear from you guys. I think that's one of the things that we both kind of were like, this would be cool to have this be way more interactive. And hear from you guys and hear some of your struggles, whether they're in corporate or whether they're in the creative world, because we've got that benefit of like Liz's experience and my somewhat experience in the corporate world. I was going to say something else, but I've now forgotten. So this has been fun.
It's been awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye, team.
Bye, guys. Bye.